So, I'm going to be doing a stream of consciousness. Review, I guess. But I feel like calling this a review is disingenuous because I'm not going by any metric or criteria. This is just my thoughts and feelings on the book. I will be spoiling everything. Just go into that eyes open. And if you're just looking for a TLDR, I liked it, read it. So, I tend to be very negative whenever I give opinions, even on things I loved. And for the most part, I loved this book. So, be aware that I will have a lot more negative things to say than positive. And I'm okay with that. It's just how I am. So, the book picks up literally where Peace Talks left off. Like, within 10 seconds. It is very obvious to even people that I assume didn't know that originally it was all written as one book, that it was written as one book. And I never had an issue with that myself. I'm aware some people did, that they felt like the fact that Peace Talks just built to an climax that never really happened, at least didn't happen in that same book, were very disappointed, and I understand that. And it's a perfectly valid opinion. It's just not my opinion. That being said, one big negative, and I do focus on the negative, about Battlegrounds is that the entire book is a climax. I listened to it on audio, and that's just under 16 hours. I think it's 15 and a half. And probably 13 and a half hours of that is a fight scene. It's an extended fight, and there are conversations therein, but it is still all one big epic climactic fight scene. And it actually got wearying to read, even in audio form. I guarantee if I'd been reading it physically, I would have started skimming it, because at a certain point, I care more about the plot progression than about how many injuries Harry has accrued by this point in the fight, or who died. It kind of got to the point where the fight went on for so long that I just started zoning out and doing other things until I heard the narrator's tone of voice change, as if he was doing a conversation, and then I would tune back in and be like, crap, and I gotta skip back a few seconds to figure out what I missed. And that's not a good thing. And this has nothing to do with Jim Butcher's writing style. At least not really. I think the idea was fantastic. I just think it was overdone. I feel like it was just too long. If the book had been 3 hours shorter, 4 hours shorter, I think it would have been a lot more concise and a lot more fast-paced, because it did drag. It did feel really slow at some points. Okay, so for more specifics, the book begins right where book 1 ends, or Peace Talk ends. They're on the boat, they go to town. I'm probably going to miss a lot of details. I'm just going to touch on the points that really, really stood out to me. Anyway, he goes back and meets up with people, and that's fine. It's a normal Dresden Files. What's the word for it? It's not really a Dresden Files issue. It's more of a suspension of disbelief thing you have to be able to do if you want to be able to enjoy any kind of fantasy book. Like the concept that Dresden doesn't tell anybody important to him anything ever, to build that sense of mistrust just specifically so that Jim Butcher can use that sense of mistrust to push certain plot points, is incredibly aggravating, and it's just something I kind of have to deal with at this point in the books. I get it. I think it might even be reasonable, but I'm not 100% sure I would agree with that. Maybe I'm just less of a narcissistic, no, that's not the right word, less of a self-righteous douchebag than Harry is, I guess. I would definitely at least try and talk to fucking somebody. All that being said, he goes there and there's shenanigans. Everybody's getting ready for the fight. And that's fine. More characters come back. And that's another issue I think this book might have had, is there's too many characters. There's the Wraiths. There's all of them, basically. Everybody's here. If they've been in a book before as even like a secondary character, they're probably in this book. So Karen's there. The werewolf dudes are there. The White Court's there. Marcone and his dudes are there. Odin's there. Fucking Winter's there. Summer shows up. Like, it's a clusterfuck. The White Court's latest episode of... Or not White Court, I'm sorry. White Council. I seriously think the White Council is the weakest part of the Dresden Files as a whole. The concept of the White Council and the way it acts makes no fucking sense to me. It is so blatantly, obviously a corrupt and abused system that the idea that the people in it don't even recognize that makes no sense, and I find it very hard to believe. Sorry, going off on a tangent. Like I said, this is stream of consciousness, not scripted. Anyway, I'm going to pull up the audiobook and skim in it real quick so I can... Where the fuck is it? Dresden Files. Battlegrounds. Open iTunes. Just so I can catch
Penguin Random House Audio
myself up.
Battleground. Necessary, Mab said smoothly before he could speak.
Okay, so they were using Marcone's castle as a base of operations. That's reasonable. Probably even the right decision. The Svartal elven people dudes, the people Thomas tried to assassinate the king of, just kind of disappear. Like, they were the plot, or at least the immediate antagonist of book 1, Peace Talks. And in this book, they just aren't there anymore. Not literally, they have like a cameo in a fight, but realistically, they're not there anymore. It's kind of weird. They just vanished. So they use Marcone's base as a base of operations, and that's cool. They're on the rooftop. Harry's talking to people, and he even like monologues to himself at one point, where he admits that him lying to everybody is not a good thing, and that's going to change. Spoiler, it doesn't change. He keeps doing it the entire story. And, you know, he stops an assassin on Mab. Not an assassin, more like a debilitation on Mab. And ends up coordinating with the... Fuck, what's that little fairy's name? The wild little folk, whatever they're called. The pizza people. And accidentally creates a horrifying million monster army out of tiny little people with fucking custom war implements. Honestly, I think the little folk would be the most terrifying part of this story if they were the bad guys. Couldn't really do anything to them. But and that was fun. I think that whole scene and the whole experience with Major General, whatever the fuck his name is, was really well written. Everything about that character and his side piece, the armor chick with the fishhooks, was super well done. It was fun to read. It made sense in the story. It never really felt overpowered or out of place in the setting, at least. The only real issue is they were still very obviously comic relief, and I think that's almost a disservice to the characters at this point, because they are some of the most consistently powerful, loyal, and trusted allies in the story, if not the most. I think they're the only character in the story, as like the little folk as a whole, that I would expect probably would just never even be cognizant or capable of betraying Harry. So, there's been some skirmishes up until about this point in the story. No real big knockdown dragouts, and it's probably 3 hours into the book. Then the first real big fight happens. Man, the Fomor enemy names are so stupid. Octo apes, or whatever, turtlenecks, and the hunters. Man, Dresden, or really at this point, Butcher, they were really badly named. Like, even insulting name was terrible. Anyway, the first fight is some hunters, I believe, came down the street that Marcone's castle was on, and Harry heard them breaking down the door and the people in the house screaming. And of course he goes to help. That's good. That's the right decision for the character, I feel. It was perfect. He tried to hold back, but he just couldn't, and everybody up there knew he couldn't. It had even been a discussion point earlier. So Harry and the fucking monkey Sasquatch dude, River Shoulders, jump off the castle and sprint down the street, and they end up fighting in the middle of Chicago streets. 13 hunters. Harry kills 3 of them. The Sasquatch dude kills the other 9. And they rescue the family. And then after they rescue the family, they start gathering the survivors along that street and actually take them back to Marcone's castle. And I think this was a missed opportunity. That whole scene is very good. The fight scene was way too fucking long, but I'm going to say that about most every fight in this book. Most of the fights were way too fucking long. I think that fight took like 45 minutes to read. It destroys the ability to detect the tension and the pacing of a fight if it takes so fucking long to read. They take the people back to the castle. Harry says something condescending to Marcone. Marcone lets the people into the castle. And then it effectively skips to Harry talking to the coordinators of the fight again. I feel like there was a great moment there that definitely happened in the story. It wasn't shown to the reader, or at least not clearly, of the people seeing like Viking warriors in the Einherjaren, fucking seeing the little folk flying around, seeing random winter fae wandering around, just their reactions to the world around them being unveiled would have been such a good experience to read about. Instead, we got, they're in the castle, let's go to the next fight. And I was disappointed. And I don't like being disappointed in a thing I like this much. Okay. So that was the first fight, but the first true conflict was next. This is a huge spoiler, by the way. If you haven't read it and you don't want spoilers, this is the time to stop, because from here on out, some real shit happens in the story. So they're getting ready to move their troops, and the little folk tell Harry that there's some people in the park doing shenanigans, and Harry's like, oh fuck, that's Graceland Cemetery. Obviously, it's necromancers. Reasonable assumption. So Harry goes and brings Ramirez, Yoshimo, the British dude, and Wild Bill, I believe, with him, along with River Shoulders and Listens to Wind, to go check out the cemetery. When they get there, it's not necromancers that are beating the drum to do necromancy. It's actually the Black Court. Mavra is back. She's a side character, though, to be clear. You're told in, I believe, Grave Peril or Deadbeat, whenever the Black Court was first introduced, when Harry's hand got all fucked, that only the most powerful and oldest of the Black Court are still alive, because Dracula books made it so efficiently easy to kill them. And this is the first time they've really shown that. Mavra's there, but she's actually like the whipping boy. She's lowest on the totem pole. There's a whole bunch of other random superpowered vampires. He basically turned them into supervillains, right? He gave each one of them a specific power, and that's their thing. Based on the lore of the black vampires that had been created up to that point, that is nonsense, but we're just going to roll with it because it was interesting. But there's also the super vampire, of course. Lord Dracul, apparently, Dracula's daddy, is there. So Harry and his troops are fighting the vampires, and they're doing okay. Not great, but okay. And then Dracul steps in, and he's the super boss, right? So he beats the shit out of everybody, knocks a bunch of them unconscious. Harry and he are fighting. He's losing, because it's early in the book. Harry always loses to the bad guys. I think Rear Shoulders came out of nowhere and saved his ass, if I'm remembering properly. Yeah. Harry was like, knock, 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 who's there? Because the vampire was about to crush him. And he's like, I don't know who's there. And he's like, 1,000-pound Sasquatch or some shit. And I'm like, I get Butcher is trying to continue Harry's insouciance in the face of death. And I think it's okay. I think it's less okay in this book because near the end of the book, he just stops doing that. Anyway, so River Shoulders and dudes start fighting, and then Listens to Wind shows up, and Harry actually gets dragged off by Mavra and dragged over to where the other vampires have recovered and actually kidnapped all the wardens who have been beaten. The British dudes ends up getting thrown through a portal to somewhere it's never revealed. And they actually kill and turn Yoshimo, which is the Japanese lady, and Wild Bill. Ramirez and Harry end up escaping because I believe Waldo Butters comes in and shoves garlic. No, it's not Waldo. It's Toot Toot. Major General Toot Toot cuts open Mavra's back and shoves garlic into her, and so she runs away screaming and on fire, which lets Harry get out, and Harry helps Ramirez escape, and together Harry sneezes and drops an anvil on that guy. By the way, weird thing, all of Peace Talks, his conjuritis was like a major plot point. Honestly, it came up so often it was supposed to be a major plot point. At this one specific moment in Battlegrounds, he feels it coming on. And so he imagines a cartoon anvil falling out of the sky and crushing the vampire holding Ramirez. That was interesting. From that point forward, conjuritis never shows up again, and it is never even remarked on for the rest of the story. It's very obviously Butcher just forgot about it, just totally spaced on it. Anyway, Ramirez helps him out. They go back to help fight Dracul, but Dracul just leaves. And their opinion of it is, well, he was obviously not working with the Fomor. He just came here to try and get recruits. And since he just converted 2 wardens of the White Council into Black Court vampires, he's happy and done, so it just leaves. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's actually some supervillain shit. So while I don't like that scene myself, I feel like it was a little random and out of fucking nowhere. Like, this entire scene, everything about it, start to finish, could be excised from the audiobook, ripped out and deleted and never mentioned, and the entire book would be completely coherent start to finish, and you would never even know it was gone. If you can say that about like an hour and a half long chunk of your story, then that chunk of the story needs substantial changes, I feel. So that entire scene makes it, the entire thing is just a setup for another boss fight down the road in another book. It's whatever, I get it. He feels the need. I think he's just uncomfortable with his writing right now and feels the need to have cliffhangers. So I wasn't happy with that scene. Honestly, I was bored. Like, I don't care about those wardens. Honestly, I think if the whole White Council wasn't part of the story, the world would be better. I think they really hold back the magical aspect of the Dresden verse. That if magic were more readily available in the world from humans, there could be a lot more interesting encounters. Instead, every piece of magic that happens is through the veil of this, I guess, tyrannical controlling body, basically an Illuminati, and it's just wearying. Here's something interesting. Bob's back. Bob the Skull. Butters just hands Harry Bob the Skull and doesn't comment on it. I like what he was in the story for. They have no communications, but Bob is a spirit of intellect. He's, I guess, able to detect radio waves. I'm not sure if that's a new power or not, so I'm just going to assume not. And so Harry basically uses him as a receiving antenna for news from across the city. As to Bob's value to the story, there really isn't any. It's pretty obvious Butcher just wanted him in the book and didn't really have a place for him. So he just kind of became Harry's chat box, I guess. Like, I'm not going to say he didn't contribute to the story, because he did. And in the end, he actually contributed in a relatively substantial way. But until the final fight scene, there was really nothing. I could also, by the way, say the same about the alphas. The werewolves, they're there. The whole story, start to finish, they're in basically every fight. But they're not part of the story. Every now and then you just hear Dresden comment on the fact that they exist and that they're there. The most impactful thing they did the entire story was, at one point, Dresden ran into Rudolph and the other detective from Peace Talks that was with them, Rudolph's new partner. And Rudolph and him were like, "We're going to arrest you," when Harry's trying to get back across the city from the docks. And the werewolves just kind of come out of nowhere and scare him off. And then he soul gazes Rudolph's partner, who freaks out and was like, "Stay the fuck away from me." And then Harry leaves. I think that's the most impact they had on the story. The next scene was very cool. It was one of the best scenes in the book, if I'm remembering my order right. And I am periodically listening to the audiobook to keep my mind rolling. The next scene was super cool. Harry and his troops get back from the vampires and they're like, shit went down. So him and Sonya and all their troops just start marching across the city. They have to head off the troops before, or the enemy, before they destroy the whole city. And as they're going, they start passing survivors. And winter troops in Harry's winter mantle begins to react to the Deus Ex Machina the fear amplification of magic, and sort of creating not a hive mind, but a psychic link between him and all of winter, and then him and all of the humans, just ordinary people, who decide that he looks like he's going to start taking the fight to the bad guys. We're going to join him. And that whole scene of him marching across the city and building this bigger and bigger and bigger army behind him was very intense. It was just this... It was a moment of, like, badasses don't look at their own explosions, almost, where he just was marching and these people were like, fuck yeah, that guy knows what's up. And I really enjoyed it. That whole scene, start to finish, it was great. Like, he started really commanding winter troops to clear the way. He met up with Mab and she was like, yeah, you can arm them, and he busts out and there's a whole stockpile of guns there, because it turns out Marcone was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be Baron of Chicago. What if some shit goes down? Let's stash weapons fucking everywhere. And I think some people are probably gonna think that's Deus Ex. No, I think that's completely in character, especially with some of the shit that we find out later. So he ends up with an army of like 1,200 humans, untold numbers of Winter Fae, probably just a few hundred. And they're all armed with shotguns. It's hard to mess with a shotgun. So that's interesting. They end up at a car lot. I think it was a car park. Him and the White Council people that are left. Mab, his troops, and the Einhard Jar, yeah. Anyway, they're fighting, and then there's like this dramatic reveal scene where a Jotnar comes out of the sea, who's a giant of Norse myth, specifically Fire Jotnar, which is weird. I thought all Jotnar were frost, but whatever, I guess I was wrong. Anyway, they come out of the mist, and the Einhard Jar just start having a collective orgasm, because apparently they love to fight Jotnar. And from everything described, I'm assuming they were somewhere in the vicinity of 35, 40 feet tall, and proportionately built like a professional wrestler. So probably somewhere in the vicinity of 6,000 to 7,000 pounds. Really strong, really big, apparently highly intelligent, also highly stupid. So there's like this really good, like even good from my perspective, and I don't like fight scenes, where the Jotnar are coming, Harry is holding them off, the Black Staff is doing crazy magic, the Einherjaren are jumping on them, and it's just violent, it's gory, it's fast paced. That's so important with a good fight, that it's over relatively quick, because if it draws out, you get bored. This one was not drawn out, and it ends in a very big way. Like, one of them manages to escape, like all of them are dead but this one, and he gets to the car park and brings his axe down and destroys the car park, and Harry just shoves Ramirez and his McCoy away, and doesn't know if they survive or not. You don't see them again for a long time. Spoiler, they're not dead. So that was cool. Butters and Sonya show up and rescue Harry. At this point, this is also the part of the story where one very interesting thing has begun to happen regularly, and it happens all the way to the end of the book. And it's something that never happens in these books. The big bad guy, the Titan lady, I forget her name, N3 or something like that, is actually using her ultimate weapon on cooldown. So it has like a 2-minute cooldown between uses, and every time it's up, you see, apparently they're all seeing like these fucking red lights going off, and buildings are collapsing, and thousands of people are dying. And that's just as she's walking across the city, walking down Lakeshore Drive. They brought that up a bunch. The bad guy in this isn't saving her ultimate weapon. She is using it as often as she fucking can. And I found that awesome. She's a terrible villain. The big bad end guy, BBEG of this story, which is that fucking Titan, is an atrocious, horrifically bad, probably the worst villain in the entire series so far. And yet she's also the first villain I've read in a book in years where she gets her super weapon and just starts fucking using it all over the place. And I think that was really interesting. It was really good, and it added a lot to the story. It added a time pressure that was even more than what was already there. Because in most stories, this would have been the defenders trying to just outlast them. And then she would have shown up, and then they would have tried to stop her before she got off one blast. Nah. They had to go and find her because she was destroying everything. And I think that added a good source of tension to the book. Okay, we're about the halfway point of the book, and this is where something, I'll tell you about it. So he's marching across the city, and then they've met up, and I believe they've armed their people. Then Harry gets a message from Major General Toot Toot that there's a building full of children that's right in the path of a bunch of Fomor hunters and the Jotnar. So he's like, shit, we gotta go. But they've still gotta get armed. Sonya's organizing them into military units or something like that. And so Harry's like, come catch up with us. And Murphy, who am I forgetting? The Alphas, the werewolves, I believe. And I think the Winter Cats, the Grimalkin and the whatever they're called, went with him. And I think he took some ogres too. Whatever, he took some winter troops, Murphy, and I believe the Alphas. And they went to the school, and they found Rudolph's partner detective standing in front of it, shooting hunters and defending the building. Harry helps him finish off the hunters, and then he goes inside, knocks Rudolph out because Rudolph is in the building being hysterical. Drake carries him out over one shoulder and holding his daughter, his infant daughter, in the other arm. I think that was heavy-handed. I don't think there was any real need for Harry to intuit that this guy's kid was the kid he was holding. It felt a little weird, but at the same time, whatever. I didn't really think it hurt the story. And a bunch of other kids and an old lady. And then the Jotnar from before walks around the building. The one who destroyed the car park. So he's like, who are you, Harry? Because Harry stopped him from killing him in one hit. So he's like, got old Viking tradition. So he's like, Harry introduces himself and starts bragging about his accomplishments, trying to buy time for the other dudes to escape. Well, the partner dropped Rudolph at one point. So Rudolph is laying there and Harry's like, just go, I'll take care of him. So the dude grabs his kid and runs. And then Harry fights the Jotnar. Of course, we're still in the early half of the book, so Harry loses. Harry does not ever beat the big bad people. Like, if it's a challenging fight at the early to midway, he always loses. So you got to accept that with this series. He does not win fights until the end of the book. So he fights this dude and he just gets his shit wrecked, right? He's got his like Deus Ex Machina magic. I want to bring that up real quick. So because of the eye and the Titan lady being the incarnation of hate, basically, according to the story, that created enough fear in the populace that their terror basically magically infused the air, and Harry is able to use that to empower his magic. That felt stupid beyond all belief for the entirety of the story. I know why he did it. I know why Butcher did that. Because every piece of Dresden lore he's created to this point would have Harry running out of magic after the first or second fight. And by the end of this book, he's probably been in nearly endless fight for fucking 6 hours. So I get it. He needed a way to keep Harry's tank full, so to speak. And I don't even know that there was a better option. I just don't like it. It sets a bad precedent. It sets a precedent that anytime a fight in this world happens in public, then the civilians around panic is just going to supercharge all wizards. And that basically turns all wizards into phobophages. Which means I don't understand why anybody who wants to be like a black necromancer would want to do it in secret. You would get massive power boosts from doing it in public. So, anyway, back on subject. Harry's fighting the Jotnar. and losing. And then the Jotnar, of course, says, "You fight like a woman." Camera flash to Karen Murphy. Bazooka. Boo. One-shots the Jotnar. I don't get it. I don't know why Butcher refuses to let Harry win a fight. It's ridiculously dumb, but I've just come to accept it as the reality of the world I live in. Anyway, Harry pulls out a bazooka from fucking fuck all who knows. Shoots the dude in the neck, blows up the Jotnar in one hit. And they're like, "Yeah, we got it." And I saw this coming from a mile away because there was no subtlety to this. He happened to drop Rudolph, and it had been brought up earlier in the first meeting that Rudolph had no trigger discipline and was freaking out. So they're celebrating her having one shot of Jotnar, and then they hear Rudolph off camera just go, "Hands in the air," and he's freaking out, obviously. They're trying to talk him down, and he pulls the trigger and shoots Murphy in the throat, and she just dies in the street. Spoiler alert, Murphy's dead. And I don't mean Murphy's dead, but not really. No, I mean Murphy's dead. And she's never going to be part of the story again going forward. Except for maybe in a flashback, but this book isn't big on series isn't big on flashbacks. So Karen Murphy has been axed. Now, I've read reviews, and a lot of people think it's bullshit that Karen died. I don't. I think Karen Murphy needed to die. Hear me out. Fucking don't lynch me. So, I've never felt that her and Dresden were a good couple. I just haven't. I think they were work wives, work husband. And Butcher felt pressure from fans to make them into a couple. And I think that hurt their relationship. There was no more real antagonism between them, no more tension. And that basically turned Karen into a very convenient side character. Very competent side character, I'm sorry. And this book the series doesn't need more of those. Now, do I think there are other things he could have done with Karen? Sure. But this isn't Karen's story, it's Dresden's. So I think Karen dying in this book is fine. But I don't agree with having her randomly shot by Rudolph. That's dumb. It makes... I'm not even sure I can honestly say it makes sense. Like, if Rudolph is two characters in this story. He's the cunning, paid informant for Marcone. He is that, apparently. He might not actually be, but that's how he's portrayed in the story. Is this dogged dude paid by Marcone to just ruin Harry's life in any way he can. And yet he's also this spastic, unthinking coward who can't do anything right. Marcone's never been shown to be somebody who pays for bad quality goods, for lack of anything else to say. So I don't find it likely that he would pay to have this motherfucker, but whatever. So anyway, Rudolph shoots Karen, and Karen dies in Harry's arms on the street. Just bleeds out. Waldo Butters has shown up by this point, and he's like, "Oh God, Harry, what has happened? No." So Harry obviously goes apeshit. Now, this next scene, I wanted to like it. I did. I really wanted to like this next scene. But it was just so bad and heavy-handed. I think the message is good for the story. It's not one I agree with, to be clear. But for the character in the world, I think it's the right one. But I do not like the execution. So Dresden runs down Rudolph. Rudolph is screaming in fear because Dresden's apparently going all crazy motherfucking serial killer on him. Reasonable. He just murdered his girlfriend. So Dresden turns on his magical shield and just starts pushing Rudolph against a wall real hard. Breaks his finger. I think he breaks his nose and like breaks a rib. from the force of pushing him against the wall. That doesn't suit Dresden on any level at all. Like, if Dresden wanted to hurt him, he would use fire. If Dresden wanted to kill him, he would use fire. If Dresden wanted to make an example of him, he would use ice. In no way does Dresden, like, belly bumping him against the wall to crush him make any fucking sense. It was the most irritatingly stupid decision from a writing perspective. This whole scene was just not great. The fight was good. It was short. It was high octane, except for that I knew Dresden was going to lose. But the whole Karen getting shot by Rudolph instead of dying while killing the Jotnar is kind of so stupid. And then Dresden trying to belly bump him into the wall to kill him. Fuck. So of course Sonya shows up and he's like, Harry, no, this isn't you. You can't kill the man in cold blood even though he just murdered your girlfriend in front of you. So Harry beats the shit out of Sonya some fucking how. Goes back over there and then he goes to beat up or kill Rudolph again, I'm assuming with more belly bumping. But then Waldo shows up and he's like, no, Harry, this isn't you. And he's like, are you going to protect that guy? And Waldo's like, I'm trying to protect you. I don't like this scene. So I just like the message. I do like the message for the story, but I don't like the scene. So Harry charges Waldo, and there was a scene earlier where they're in the last book where they were testing Waldo's sword, and they found out it doesn't hurt flesh, it only hurts evil. And so Harry just goes to block Waldo's sword with his hand and kill Rudolph. And of course it burns him. And there's this whole scene where it shocks him out of his hate-filled delirium. And he starts crying, and he has this emotional moment with Butters, and I think that's fine. Like I said, for the character and for the world, I think Harry being convinced to not kill Rudolph is the right decision. I think him killing Rudolph is also the right decision. I would have liked to have seen the emotional turmoil of Harry actually having killed him going forward. But now we're probably just going to get another side story where Rudolph got away with it and is still on the force. And now Harry's going to be super tense, and there's going to be a scene where he's growly at Rudolph, and you hear a scene where his staff creaked under his grip and the runes flared, and then he takes a deep breath and leaves. Yeah, I've read fantasy books before, right? But yeah, so him and Butters reconcile. Him and Sonya reconcile. And I don't know if they ever did anything with Rudolph. I can't remember. I don't know if they just left him in the street or if they drug him back by his hair or what. But that was the end of that scene. Okay. So the next fight scene. Yeah, I know. We would probably be 8 or 9 hours into the book at this point, and we're still in more fight scenes. He regroups again, and then Harry, Butters, and their little army of people are going to go try and take out a bridge to force the enemy to only be able to come from 1 or 2 directions instead of 3. So they do it. They go over to the bridge, they take it out. Harry and his people fight, and then they start doing a running retreat. They take out some enemies, but really they're about to get run the fuck over. Then Sonya comes out with even more of them, and they just turn into a killing field, right? They take out, I think they take out 1,000 or 2,000 Bowmore troops, and everybody's like, fuck yeah, we got this shit. And then the remainders start taking cover, and it's just a boom boom shooting at each other. And then something I did not expect happens. The Titan lady shows up and immediately just uses her eye and wipes out 400 of Harry's humans that have been following him. No fanfare. And Butcher specifically mentions that they don't die easy. that apparently this eyeball, whenever it kills you, manifests in your mind like the most tormented way you can possibly die and makes you experience that as you die. Like, fuck. So that happened, and so they just start running for their lives while she doesn't really chase and just lets them go. So I'm of two ways, right? I think it's really good that the bad guy actually used her ultimate weapon, as I mentioned before. The idea that she then lets them retreat. Now they're still being shot at, and like I think like 80 something of them don't make it to the retreat point, is good, but I think this whole scene was pretty cool. Harry and Baldo managed to blow out the bridge. They took out thousands of the enemy. But then the enemy just uses a super weapon on them, and they take out hundreds of his own troops, and he barely has more than 1,000 to begin with. And remember, I said earlier, like the hive mind thing, Harry senses it and feels it every time one of his troops die. It's a major plot point for the story. And because of that, he senses it when those hundreds of people die the most horrific deaths they can. And there's this come to Jesus moment where Dresden realizes that Mab feels this exact thing every time a soldier of winter dies. It wasn't brought up in the story, and I'm not even sure if Butcher realized he did this. But at the outer gates, hundreds of millions, if not billions, of Winter Fae have died. Horrific deaths beyond all belief to the outsiders attempting to break into our reality. If Mab experiences it every time those people die, holy mother of fucking God. So that puts a lot more, you know what? Mab, you do you, in my mind, than I used to have. And I've always thought Mab was a great character. So they do manage to retreat, though, and they get back to base. And the story continues with another fight. So the next fight, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not a big fan of fight scenes. I am a big fan of clever uses of your abilities. And what Mab did in this next fight was incredibly clever. She created an image, or like more than one, like hundreds of images of Winter Fae, and used her will to make them so real that whenever they killed the Fomor actually died. But they obviously didn't realize they were fakes. And that's super interesting. That's super cool, and it makes Mab's power feel more potent. She's like super powerful now, in your head anyway, because she's so strong that she effectively created an army out of her own mind with so much force behind it that the mental will of her belief in what she made was enough to kill people. That's cool. That's just very cool. At the same time, I'm so tired of fight scenes at this point. I was exhausted reading it that I took a break. I loved finished books. Like, I read that shit all the way through. I had to put it down and just do other things for a while because the whole book was blurring together. That's why I keep having to stop the recording and listen to parts of the audiobook to keep it all in once, like in a line, because there's so many fights that I can't keep it straight. And this fight was just another one. Other than the cool concept of what she did, honestly, this wasn't a very interesting fight. The bad guys pushed the good guys back, and then it was over. They lost they just did another fighting retreat effectively. I mean, there was nuance. There was the bad guy listened. Don't know who the fuck that is, but apparently he's a badass. Commander is like the super genius guy, but his whole plan was send in aerial units and then the ground units. Yeah, dude needs to play Civ. So, Mab was cool. Right. This next bit is the best worst part of the book. The final, not really the final, but the penultimate fight. It's Mab, Odin, Titania, Molly, her troops, the unicorn Sleipnir, Harry-ish, Butters, all fighting. Entu, or Antony, the Titan Lady. And it goes on for 2 fucking hours. Holy shit. I honest to God cannot tell you how the fight went. It went on and on and on. So I did not like that. I just didn't. It was terrible. It was not good. It was genuinely bad. It was Stormfront bad. I'm not saying it was badly written. It was badly paced. There's no... Okay, it's, by the way, to be clear, it's not literally just them. It's army versus army. And Harry and Butters are trying to get to the fight between the big bads. Well, the big bads and the less big bads that are on the good guys team. And there's just so much, man. There's like... the story just cuts out to describe scenes of good guys dying, bad guys dying, good guys and bad guys dying. While also flashing forward to the fight with the Titan Lady, where she bitch slaps Mab, and Ebenezer tries to bitch slap her, and Ebenezer gets bitch slapped, and Odin gets his ass whipped, and it's just... Then Marcone shows up with a fucking pirate bandolier of 18 pistols that can somehow hurt her. Honest to God, it's a clusterfuck. I understand what Butcher was going for. It's something he did in Codex Alera, and he did it very well there. He did it better in Codex Alera. He was trying to create a battle with a sense of scale. Like he did in Summer Night, almost, but this was much bigger. Where he wanted to make this big battle where to the reader it felt like Harry was just this tiny piece and make it feel hopeless. And I know he tried to push the hopeless thing in because of the shit he makes Dresden think later. And he wanted it to feel hopeless and like there was no chance of victory. And I kind of get it. I think this is actually a fault of the author. And I know I don't say that much. I think most writing things, I agree with the author portraying their vision. I think in this case, the vision was flawed. And it's not really a Butcher thing. It's something I see in a lot of authors where they forget that they also need to be able to use a suspension of belief. We can't take a fight like this seriously if we... How do we put this? If the bad guys win, the series is over. If the stakes hit a certain point of height, we can't honestly think there's a chance the good guys lose. We can think that they lose personally. Like Karen dying. Like, and earlier, Dresden having a crippled hand. Sandra dying. Like, they're personal losses. But to lose the war, or I guess battle, the stakes have to be smaller almost. Because if they lose this fight, she goes on to effectively destroy the world, unopposed. So, we know she can't lose this fight. So, at no point did I actually feel the tension he was so obviously trying to push. I felt tension for characters I didn't want to die, and that was good. That was well done. I thought Ebenezer died at one point. Whenever he came back in the epilogue, I was like, well, that's unfortunate. Because I think him dying would have been good for the story. So, I don't think it was done well, as I said. I think it was too big. I think it should have focused on Harry traveling more than it did. I also think the end of this book was way more about Butters than Harry. Not the literal end, but like this fight, this 2-hour long fight, it was the Butters show. Butters won the fight. Butters is the hero. He did everything. Everything. He's the only reason anything went right. And I think that shouldn't be the case because of some shit that Harry says later. Harry says that the Knights of the Cross are specifically there to even the scales, not win them. So they're there to make sure that the fight can be won, but not to win it for you. And yet Butters kept it from losing. Like, he stood there for 35 minutes of a 2-hour fight, and he was the only reason they didn't lose. And I know you can make an argument that, yeah, but that's them balancing the scales. No, it's not. That's him holding the scales hostage and not letting them move. So, I don't know. I think a lot of the power scale got away from Butcher in this book. He either needs to upgrade Harry to beyond Winter Knight, or bring the bad guys back into line with him. Because it's unfeasible, I think, for Harry to be playing in these big leagues. Not whenever the stakes aren't mental control and shit like that, but whenever they're just outright death. I think this whole situation got out of hand for the author. Specifics. Mab gets her shit wrecked. She doesn't die. Ode gets his shit wrecked. Butters somehow gets his shit wrecked, but not as badly, so he manages to hold her off, kind of. And then the weirdest thing happens. As well, I forgot about this. This part of the book made me stop, look at my fucking iPod, and be like, what? And it was the worst piece of writing in this book. And like I said at the beginning, I think this is a good book, regardless of all my negative opinions, because I really only have negative opinions about books whenever I'm talking about them. This part of the story is actively bad. Like, whenever Titan Bitch knocks everybody out, and it's just Harry and her. It was actually before Butters shows up. And he's looking at her, and we've been going on all the time about how he has the dagger. He can't think about the dagger. He's got the dagger for whenever he gets close to her. He's going to use the dagger. He's got the dagger, the dagger, the dagger, the dagger, the dagger, the dagger. He finally gets to within melee range of this bitch. And all we get is like 20 minutes of an internal monologue of Harry Dresden going, woe is me, there's no hope, all is lost, I guess we're dead, I give up. For like 20 minutes. He doesn't even try and fight back. Doesn't even vaguely resist. That is antithetical to the character. That is the exact polar opposite of his knee-jerk reaction to any situation. It made no sense. I hated it. And it was so fucking blatantly obviously there just so Waldo Butters could have his big hero moment. It substantially injured a already poorly done fight scene and made it noticeably worse. So, man, that was bad. Oh man, it's pissing me off just talking about this. Like, there's been so many scenes in this book up to this point where everybody else around him was like, we have no chance, and Harry was like, we have to. We don't have a choice but to have hope. And it's constantly talking about Maggie and how he has to be able to save her, and about Michael, and then he gets to the final boss and he gives up without even throwing a punch. Like, just gives the fuck up. Just so Butters can stand up to her and be like, have faith. And then he says I'm not alone. And she laughs at him and he's like, oh, I'm not alone. And then they hear the Jotnar horn, but then River Shoulders jumps out holding the Jotnar horn. And of course, an army comes out with the rest of the troops. That's where Marcone and Hendrix and Lara Wraith and all them come in. And that's where they join the battle and turn the tide. That was so bad, man. Oh. If I had one wish about this story, it would be that he would just delete every word written in this conflict. Not the book, just the specific sub-conflict of it. And rewrite it all from the ground up. Because it was so bad. If I had just read this as like a standalone fight, I would think the main character was like the protagonist of an anime in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it's just some high school kid who's incompetent and doesn't do anything, and all the people around him have to save the day. That's the impression I got from this fucking fight as Harry Dresden's point of view. It was horrific to read. Eventually, Harry does get his shit together, and he takes the dagger out of his belt, puts it on his staff, and turns out he had been holding the fucking... Oh my god, what was it called now? I know it's in the movie Constantine. The spear used to stab Jesus while he was on the cross. Spear of Destiny. Which is a divine artifact, which would be capable of hurting her, and does. So I think that was cool. Like, that concept was okay. I don't think it was great, but it was okay. It was good enough. And it made sense in the story, kind of. That feels like the kind of thing that would be in Demon Reach. So, Archive is here in the story, by the way. She's not part of the story, but she's in the fight. So they fight her. I think Lara Wraith knocks the super weapon eyeball out of the bitch's head. Marcone picks it up and sprints down the street. So Ethniu, Titan Lady, runs after him. Harry also runs after him. Ethniu gets stopped by somebody and has to like fight. That's the only reason I can think that Harry would actually catch up with him before her. And I don't remember that happening, but it's the only thing that makes any sense. So Harry catches up with him. And he's like, alright, we're going to set up my trap. And I'm going to bind her. And Marcone's like, I'll be the bait. Which, whatever, makes sense. So Marcone's the bait, and he draws her out, and they shit talk. And Harry starts drawing his binding circle. And Marcone gets bitch slapped. Like, he gets killed, just straight up. Bitch hits him, breaks his neck and every other bone in his body, and slings him across the room. Or I guess across the street. Harry's like, fuck. Bob. I'm probably telling this out of order, but I don't care. I'm doing stream of consciousness, right? Harry does bind her into place, like in a circle, so she can't get out. And Harry goes to check on Marcone and to get the eyeball from him, because Marcone was still holding it. And when he grabs it, Marcone fucking blinks and looks up at him. Turned out Marcone is actually holding Thorned Namishell's fallen Daenerys ring, and he's bound himself to the fucking fallen angel. If you don't remember who Thorn Namshell was, I could be misremembering, but I think it was the dude in the beginning of book 6, maybe book 6, who was like the first fallen angel Harry interacted with, and at the end of the book, he beat his knees into pulp with a baseball bat, and then made him go across broken glass to call for... But I think he ended up killing that guy and like getting his thing. Well, apparently now Marcone has it. Now, this is another point of contention. I've written a lot of the reviews that people didn't like the way Marcone did this, because they loved the concept of Marcone being the robber baron of New York, or I mean of Chicago, without using any magical means other than money. And I think that's an interesting concept, but I think it's a self-serving and ignorant one. If you were Marcone, playing in the circles and for the stakes he is, there is no chance in hell you would not do something to level the playing field, to learn how to wield magic, to become immortal, all that shit. So him taking the ring of a Denarian, completely reasonable, if not expected from the beginning. I thought I fucking saw this coming 10 books ago. This is exactly the kind of thing. I didn't think it would be Thorin Namshiel. I thought it would be Anduriel, which is Nicodemus's. But whatever. One thing that's interesting though is this means that there's a Denarian on the Accords now, but who isn't under the Accords as a Denarian, which is kind of interesting. I think it's okay though. Like I said, I think the idea of Marcone taking the coin of a Denarian and using it to further his power is right. It makes sense for his character, and it is what he would do. Now, Harry and Titan Lady. He is like, Titan bitch, I bind thee. Titan bitch, I bind thee. And then she's like, did you really think we didn't see this coming? And then at first I thought it was a hallucination, just, another vision. No, apparently it was a memory. She replays a memory of her and her troops going to Michael Carpenter's house and if I remember, I could be misremembering, but I think I'm remembering right, of her and her troops standing outside while human troops, because remember, the Fomor are human. They're mutated, but they're still human. And the guardian angels around Michael's place do not interact with humans. They only interact with evil entities, spiritual entities. So going into the house and just butchering the whole household, including Harry's daughter. And it was a memory, not a vision. And she forced it into Harry. But at the end of it, he just started laughing. He said, you forgot the dog. So way earlier in the story, Molly was like, I gotta go do something. It turned out that something was she took her family from the carpenter's house and just moved them across the street to the other house she bought. And then she put illusions in place in the house to emulate the people, because the humans going in there wouldn't be able to see through illusion. So they thought they had killed him, but they had really just like broken up some wood. And the only reason Harry knew was because she hadn't made an illusion of the dog, of Mouse. And that was sort of a message to Harry to let him know, because there's no fucking way Mouse would let anything happen to Maggie while he was still alive. So Harry was like, I bind thee. And he did. He bound her, and he locked her away in Demon Reach. And that was a good scene. Demon Reach coming out of the sea like a fucking avenging god, and just grabbing this Titan bitch and almost effortlessly dragging her into the prison from across the lake. That was super cool. I love Demon Reach. It is the best part of the story. The concept and the execution of Demon Reach at every turn has been fantastic from my perspective. And Harry won. That should be the end of the book, right? Nope. Another 2.5 hours to go. So, Harry bound her. Him and Marcone have like a tense moment over the eye, but Marcone's like, we won't fight yet, and gives the eye to Harry. And then I believe Lara Wraith shows up with... Lara shows up with Justine. And Terry and Justine, after she asks him to see Thomas, start heading to the island. And they have a conversation. But on the way there, Harry recalls from peace talks what he heard Thomas say. And there's a little clarity given in this part of the scene that was not there in peace talks. I know, I listened to peace talks yesterday, where Thomas said, Justine. Apparently he actually said, it's Justine. Turns out Justine is infected with Nemesis. Not gonna lie, I did not see that coming. I should have. It was very obvious looking back at it, but I didn't catch a fucking whiff of it. And that when Harry confronts him in Justine's body, dude outright admits it. Says that he's been in Justine since before Justine even became Laura's right hand, which is crazy because that means Justine was infected in like book 5 at the earliest, at the latest, and Harry manages to thrice compel him to reveal his name, and it turns out that Nemesis is actually he who walks beside, which means now we got he who walks behind, he who walks before, and he who walks beside, all three interfering with Harry and this Starborn bullshit. So Harry's like, fuck. He starts trying to buy time so that he can get to Demon Reach Island and obviously entrap her and the Walker. Things don't go to plan. Harry wakes up a couple days later, I think, or maybe a couple hours later, after getting rescued from the drink by a couple of White Court vampires, and Justine's escaped. And then the troops show up and it's cleanup. Harry goes over to Murphy's dead body and it's gone. And in its place are 3 interlocking triangles. I'm sure it's some Celtic thing, but I cannot help but imagine this fucking linked high roll triple triangle thing now. So apparently Murphy was offered and accepted to become a Einherjar. But Einherjaren can't come back to the mortal world until all those who knew their name no longer remember them. Which means Murphy's gone. That is a more thorough way to delete her character from the story than sending her to the Catholic afterlife that she would have gone to if she hadn't become Ironherjar, because Harry is capable of speaking to those dead. He's not able to summon and interact with Einherjar. It's just part of that life. And the reason she went there, even though to be one you're supposed to have to die a valorous death, apparently they counted her death as having died to the Jotnar she killed in single combat. That's not what happened, but whatever. I didn't want to question it. Hendrix also died, and Sigrun was drinking her sorrows away. Apparently they were a thing. Harry went full name reveal, by the way. He straight told Sigrun to tell Odin that Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden will fuck his shit up if he doesn't treat Murphy better than he would have treated Murphy. I think that was pretty cool, and it suited his character. Then there's like some time jumps, there's some funerals. Then the weirdest scene. I don't think it was a bad scene. It was a weird scene though. Ramirez is sent by the White Council to tell Harry that he's off the team. And that if he doesn't play by their rules, they're gonna come for him. Rawr, right? So Harry just straight tells him, bruh, nah. I could be off the team, but y'all ain't running my life. And they basically tried to... they literally tried to extort obedience out of him by telling him that if he doesn't comply, then they will send McCoy after him. And if McCoy doesn't kill him, McCoy will be tried on treason. So they basically said, we're going to make your grandpa have to kill you, and if you won't do it, then we're going to kill your grandpa. Which is definitely not going to end well for anybody. But he still stands to his guns and says, no, fuck off. And Ramirez leaves. By the way, I've reached the point in this story where I think Ramirez and Harry's relationship is stupid. It was good in the beginning, but the idea that Ramirez just doesn't trust Harry on any level. He will not give Harry Dresden the benefit of the doubt in any context at all, is so self-indulgently ignorant that I think I hate his character now. Um, Whatever. That's over though. Then the weird bit. Mab and the Accord survivors are having a meeting. Harry shows up and he's like, "Yo, people are dead. We should help. Good PR." And they're like, "Yeah, we should do that. Good PR." And then he manages to effectively manipulate Marcone successfully into giving him back his office, his old lab, which is underneath Marcone's castle. So Marcone just gives him his fucking castle. So going forward, Harry now owns a castle in the middle of Chicago, more heavily warded than the White Council's headquarters, which I think is super cool. But then Mab, Lara, and Molly show up, and Mab tells Harry, "I will accept the White Court's third favor, where they said they want to make a binding relationship with Winter. You will get married to Lara Wraith at sundown." I did not expect that. I think it makes sense, honestly, in the story. Lara and Harry have always been the best pairing for them from a relationship stance since the characters were introduced. I've always thought Lara and Harry had the most on-screen chemistry and best potential for an antagonistic but genuinely endearing relationship, which is really good in a fantasy story. They managed to talk Mab down and making it a 1 year engagement instead of a 1 day, but they're still engaged, and I kind of hope it goes through because like I said, I think those two make the best pairing. What I'm curious about, because he very heavily brought Molly's in love with Dresden thing back up, and I'm wondering how that's going to be resolved. Because I don't think Molly Dresden is bad either. I think it's kind of weird for a lot of people, and I get it. I think it's totally reasonable to find that kind of weird because he was her teacher, and in American society, the concept of teacher-student is a big no-no. But the key word was that was like 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they're both effectively immortal now. So, I mean, at this point, I don't think prior relationships and age is going to be relevant. So I think I'm okay with that. And I think they make an interesting couple, but I worry that it falls into the same context as Karen, where they get along so well that putting them together just does nothing other than make them hard to separate. But then again, Molly does have the effect of being the winter lady, so she wouldn't be around very much anyway. She'd have her own shit to do. Or maybe he can be with both of them. It's not like Lara Wraith would give a shit about having a girlfriend. I don't know. But I really like that concept, honestly. I think it's better than Karen's, and I think it'll make the death of Karen more impactful going forward as he tries to come to terms with him having to get married effectively while still grieving his dead best friend and lover. And then the book closes out with something I've been waiting on for 5 books. And I'm so glad it showed up, and it went exactly the way I thought it would, and I love that. I think it's great. Harry finally convinced Molly to go home. She opens the front door. Her dad's there, and he's like, "Hey, Molly, I love you. I'm glad you're finally here." And she's like, "Dad, I gotta tell you something." And he's like, "What? You mean that you're the winter lady? Come on, we already know that. Come in here. We're doing Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner." And I'm like, fuck yeah. Michael Carpenter. Badass. So, I like the book. I would recommend it. Be very aware that there is a fucking lot of fight scene in this book, though. The last 2.5 hours are not a fight. The first hour and a half to 2 hours aren't really a fight. But the 11 or 12 hours in between that are all fights the whole time. And it's exhausting to read, especially in audiobook format. But James Marsters did a great job, with the singular exception of Mab's voice. I don't know why he feels like Mab has to sound like an ancient crown. It's fucking weird. She's repeatedly described as having like this immaculately gorgeous body, this cruelly seductive voice. Not this like ancient crone hag thing he would decided to give her. I felt like that was a stupid choice, but that's pedantic. As if nothing else I said was. So yeah, I liked the book. I would recommend it. I think it was... I personally don't think it was as good as Peace Talks, but that's because I don't like fight scenes very much. I think they need to be in most books, but I think they should be quick, and they should not be the majority of the story. But yeah, it was good. I'm going to give it 5 stars. Not because I think it deserves 5 stars, but because I support the author. And most of the time, if I'm willing to review a book, I'm going to give it 5 stars. So yeah, enjoy. Dresden Files Battlegrounds.